Hey everybody, it is noon on Wednesday and I'm just about to turn on the lights here in my office tank. I figured since I'm going to be shooting a video in a moment, I may as well get the whole process of turning the lights on and everything anyway. So there you go, that's what the tank looks like when the room is open. I don't have the light in the room turned on, but that is light coming in the window. It lights the tank up that much. And then that, of course, is the tank being lit. So I added some new fish last night, and that's what we're going to have a look at and a little chat about. Still got my buckets and stuff on the floor under my feet here. And somewhere in there is a ghost shrimp. And it was a ghost shrimp with berry, meaning it was carrying a clutch of eggs. So maybe we're going to have some ghost shrimp in this tank. So what I did was I went down to the foot tank at the foot of my waterfall, which has loads of guppies in it, and it's got shrimp in there. They've been breeding, the guppies have been breeding, the shrimp have been breeding in there for years. It's not overrun with either one, but it definitely has a stable breeding population in there. I've never had to worry about adding fish or adding shrimp to that tank. It just always keeps adding its own. And so last night I went down there with a dip net. I wanted to just scoop some guppies out and bring them up here. This tank only had a couple of females and a few males chasing them around and tormenting them constantly. So I figured if I mixed it up and put a small mixed-matched handful of fish in here, it would sort of spread all that tension around. Plus, it's, filling the tank up a little bit. There was almost no fish in here. And in my scooping, I apparently scooped out a shrimp. And when I looked at it, it definitely had berries. It definitely had all those little black eggs clutched under its belly or whatever. I don't know what shrimp anatomy was called, but its tail, whatever. Don't know if they are going to survive. I don't know if they will even hatch. But one of the considerations I had, one of the things I was concerned about was the total dissolved solids in the tank I have downstairs is about 1,200 parts per million. It's a tank that I never do water changes on. I just add water back to it when it needs to be topped off. And as a result, the dissolved solids in that tank have just slowly climbed and climbed and climbed and climbed. And the fish have gotten used to it over time. But taking them from water with that much dissolved solids in it and then just plopping them into water that has this much dissolved solids in it, which is probably closer to 200 to 300 parts per million in this tank, that can be quite a shock to a fish's system. And I've done it before. I've taken guppies out of that tank. I've put them right in another tank, and I've watched them just fall dead to the bottom of the tank, literally that quickly. They never even swam around. They just sort of started swimming, and then they started spiraling, and then they just fell to the bottom. So I've learned not to simply take guppies out of that tank. My water may all start out the same, and while my tanks that get regular frequent water changes may be similar enough that I can simply pull a fish out of one tank and toss it in another, in most cases that's fine. In this one particular tank, just because of the nature of the way I've got the tank set up and the fact that I don't do water changes on it very often over time, that water has become very different than my water in my other tanks, and so any fish that come out of that tank have to be treated a little differently. So what I did was I scooped up some of the water that was in that tank. I collected them basically in their own tank water. I added about 10% of fresh tap water. I have well water, so I don't have to treat it or anything. And I figured that would be about the same as if I did maybe a 10 or 20% top off in their tank, which I do regularly. So just having that fresh water added to their tank water wasn't going to be a big deal for them. After about 20 minutes, I added about maybe 10 or 15% more of the water from this tank into the container. I did that every half an hour for maybe 2 more cycles. I then started pouring some of the water out of the pitcher into the tank and letting some of the tank water sort of backwash into the filter. So at that point, I was doing some pretty significant water exchanges and getting a lot of the tank water into the pitcher. And after, I think maybe start to finish, it took me maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And by about 11 o'clock last night, they were all still swimming around in the pitcher. They all still looked fine and healthy. And so I went ahead and poured them into this tank. And as of this morning, it's been over 12 hours now, and everybody still looks pretty good. So I'm kind of excited about that. And one of the other things I did, just to make sure that they would transition a little more easily, and in hopes that this may help the shrimp eggs hatch, I added I added a bunch of salt in there. I just took salt off my kitchen counter. I don't use stuff that's got any additives or anything in it. It's just the same table salt I use when I'm, using aquarium salt. It's the same stuff. I just went ahead and poured it out of my salt shaker into my hand, and I poured a good old hefty amount into the palm of my hand. It had some weight to it, and I just dissolved that into the tank. And I'm able to say that casually and carefree, because using aquarium salt is not an exact science anyway, and fish can tolerate up to about a tablespoon per gallon and still be considered fresh water. All but the most sensitive fish wouldn't bat an eyelash, so to speak, at a tablespoon per gallon. And I can tell you, I could not possibly hold 20 tablespoons of salt in the palm of my hand. I couldn't hold 20 teaspoons of salt in the palm of my hand if I wanted to. So whatever amount I dumped into my hand doesn't come close to being even, approaching the upper end of what I could put in this tank and still have it be considered fresh water. And the fact that they're guppies means they could live in brackish water technically, but I do have a clown pleco that lives in this cave. I think he's on the bottom right now. Sometimes he's hanging on the bottom of the rock and you can actually see his silhouette. But I do have a clown pleco in there, and they cannot tolerate a lot of salt. They need fresh water, and so I didn't want to go crazy with the salt and really dump it in there. But I did probably put a good 10 to 15 teaspoons of salt in this tank, and I also did a minor water change. I didn't test the nitrates or test any of the water parameters or anything. Again, we're not doing anything that elaborate. I was just swapping some guppies out of one tank and into another. But I did do that. I got a bunch of guppies in there, and I got that one shrimp that I still have yet to see. If anybody noticed it in the video, good for you. I certainly have not yet. I'm trying to do a combination between looking at my viewfinder on the phone, thinking about what I'm saying, looking into the tank, and making sure I'm pointing the camera in the right direction and all that good stuff at the same time. So I have yet to see the darn thing. So I'm hoping it's still in there. I have had shrimp in the past jump out of tanks. Shrimp, believe it or not, they flick that tail and they go zinging, and I've seen them come up and out of the water on more than one occasion. In fact, I have actually found dried shrimp stuck to the front glass of my waterfall tank before, because they've literally flipped up and out of that foot tank and hit the glass and just stuck there and dried against the glass, and that's where I found them the next morning. So shrimp will come up and out of the tank, and I suppose there's always that possibility, but I would imagine any shrimp that's with Barry is going to just go straight to the bottom, find a good place to hunker down and protect her eggs and hide, and so she's probably down there in the rocks or the plants or something, and in time we'll get to see her, and hopefully we'll get to see a bunch of little baby shrimp swimming around in the tank, although they'll probably become fish food pretty quickly, but we'll see. Anyway, there you go. Quick update. Well, quick for me. An update on my office tank. So I hope you enjoyed that. Look forward to more to come, and I will see you real soon in the next one. Thanks again.